Whether you're a skeptic or a believer, join me, Rob McConnell, as together we'll investigate the world of the paranormal and the science of parapsychology here on the X-Zone Radio TV show on XZBN and the X-Zone TV channel on Simul TV. Since 1990, the X-Zone Radio TV show has been the place where people dare to believe and dare to be heard. Together, we'll investigate UFOs, aliens, ghosts, Bigfoot, psychic phenomenon, lake monsters, conspiracy theories, government cover-ups, the truth embargo, alien abductions, ESP, haunted locations from around the world, and so much more. With over 28 years of broadcasting and more than 4,500 individual guests, the X-Zone is truly a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality, as evidenced by the credibility, integrity, and professionalism of the guests that we bring to our international audience. If you have seen a UFO, had a close encounter, seen a ghost, Bigfoot, lake monster, or a story that you would like to share or have investigated, contact me, Rob McConnell, by sending me your email to xzone@xzoneradiotv.com, or you can call toll-free 1-800-610-7035, extension 143, and on Skype, X-Zone Radio TV. For more information on the X-Zone Radio TV show with yours truly, Rob McConnell, visit www.xzoneradiotv.com or www.xzonetvchannel.com or simultv.com and xzbn.net. Until next we meet here in the X-Zone from our broadcast center and studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, always remember, X-Zone Nation, keep your eyes to the sky and your heart in the light.
This is A Different Perspective with Kevin Randle. A retired U.S. Lieutenant Colonel, Kevin Randle has been studying UFOs for nearly 50 years. Kevin has investigated some of the most famous UFO cases in the world and has been consulted for dozens of documentaries about UFOs. Considered one of the leading experts into the Roswell UFO crash of 1947, Kevin has written more than 25 books about UFOs, including the recently published Roswell in the 21st Century. Now, here is the host of A Different Perspective, Kevin Randle.
As I've been saying for the last several weeks, I'm in Roswell. I'm still in Roswell. I will be going home shortly, I hope. Anyway, I've spent some time talking to the various researchers who are here, and you've heard some of the interviews, and looking around at the whole festival activity. And I think we need to separate the festival from the Roswell UFO case and UFOs in general, because although related, they're not really the same thing. Here's a couple of observations. The festival is a major event here in Roswell. I mean, they go all out. They block off streets. They have parades. There's literally tens of thousands of people who come into Roswell for this event. It's huge. And as I was walking around in the downtown area, I noticed an awful lot of the businesses are related to the Roswell UFO crash and talking about aliens and that sort of thing, an alien theme in the businesses. And it's not just centered in the downtown area. It's all along the main streets in Roswell. There's an awful lot of new hotels, upscale hotels in Roswell, and I suspect the reason is this story of the UFO crash has attracted a lot of attention, and a lot of people come to Roswell, not only during the festival, but all during the year to learn a little bit more about that. The last I heard, they're talking about literally hundreds of thousands of visitors to the museum in a year. And so it's been an extreme economic boon to the city, and they've exploited it very, very well, which really doesn't detract from the initial story, but it's just like, I guess, any town or any area that has something historical associated or something important that's happened there, or some kind of natural phenomenon or natural formation there that they exploit to bring tourists into the area. And Roswell's done a real good job of promoting the Roswell UFO crash. And I have to take some responsibility for that because, of course, I've written books about it. Don Schmidt and I did a book in the early 1990s, 1990, 1991, called UFO Crash at Roswell. No, I did not pick the name. That was picked by the publisher, and I argued with them, and they said, but the title tells it all in 4 words, and of course it did. But I think that kind of sparked some of the interest. The interest in the Roswell case had been kind of fading with MJ-12 coming up and some other things going on. And Don and I kind of rekindled it, I think, in some respect. Since that time, there's been literally dozens of books. I'm responsible for a number of them myself. I did The Truth About the UFO Crash at Roswell. And people said, well, why did you call it that? And I said, because I wanted to incorporate the name UFO Crash at Roswell with the first book so that you could tie them together. But I've done a number of books about Roswell. Don has done books with Tom Carey about Roswell. Friedman has done books about Roswell. Other people have done books about Roswell. There's literally dozens of books about the Roswell case. So it's become an important part of ufology. And the festival is an outgrowth of all of that. So when you look at that, you wonder if there's an element of untruth about the case. I think that you take a look at it from one point of view. Everybody agrees there was an event in Roswell. Everybody agrees something fell. It's the interpretation of that information is what is the crux of the controversy. But the city has embraced this idea. And the museum actually is very interesting. They've got some very interesting displays in there, and people have donated a lot of time and effort and money to create those displays. There was a ABC News broadcast back in July of 1947, a headline edition, and it talks about the Roswell case. And they have a copy, a recording of that initial radio report back from 1947 here in a old-looking radio, and you push the button and you hear the whole radio broadcast on that, which is kind of interesting. And they've got a lot of other displays that deal with UFOs, not just Roswell, but other UFOs. Some of it I'm not real thrilled about. They've got the placenta symbol, or the carving from the Mayan that they claim shows a Mayan ruler lifting off into space without a spacesuit, I might add, and not much in the way of a craft. That some say this is proof of ancient aliens and contact through the ages. But I don't think so. But they've got a very nice display of that sort of thing. And then they've got some things that I just don't agree with. MJ-12, they have a display of some of the MJ-12 stuff. But the displays, for the most part, are pretty much neutral. And they're not saying that this is not true, or that's not true, or this is true, and this is the absolute truth. I noticed in some of the photographs, they have a photographic display, and they've labeled what they are. This is a hoax done by a guy throwing a hubcap into the air. This is a fake done this way. We know this one's a fake. So they're attempting to be somewhat neutral. I know when Walter Hott and I had discussed the idea of the museum, and he discussed it not just with me, but with others as well, that his theory was to create a research center here in Roswell that would embrace sort of everything about UFOs. And if you're going to be a proper research center, I think you need to look at the materials that are obviously fake, the obvious hoaxes, but you treat them as that way. You say, well, we're not real sure about this, but here's the information that's been released on this sort of thing. And they've done a very good job of that. They've got an awful lot of books here from everywhere, including some of the people I would not include in my library, but they've done a very nice job of that. And it's a very interesting thing to see. And the festival is well done. There's multiple programming tracks, and they bring in the experts in various fields. I spoke with Travis Walton just today about this sort of thing. Don Schmidt, of course, we did an interview with him. Frank Kimbler, who we were going, I canceled him twice, and he's very gracious about that because of some of the situations here in the museum and the way we had to hook things up. I had to cancel his interview twice. He's done two things that I find extremely fascinating. One is he's looked for physical evidence out on the debris field and that sort of thing. And he's a trained geologist, so he's looking for that sort of thing. And he talks about some of this stuff being analyzed now in the proper laboratories, and they're getting some interesting results. I don't have the full story yet because the analysis hasn't been completed. And we'll get Frank on here, but I'm going to talk to him about two things. One is his research there and the Roswell Festival, and I'm going to talk to him about the Lost Adams diggings, which is a placer gold mine that was discovered and lost back in the late 1880s, I think it was. And he says that he knows where it is, and he will tell us where it is. And I think that's kind of interesting to go on. So I haven't done much in the way of research here, but in talking to people about their experiences around Roswell and that sort of thing, and about the Roswell case. Now, we've delved into that case here in Roswell amongst ourselves, talking about where the research has gone and what's been going on. And that becomes kind of fascinating in and of itself. And it's the different avenues being pursued by various researchers. One of the questions that had come up is, what's new? What can you do differently? Is the research done? Kimbler talked about his physical evidence research, which I mentioned just briefly. We've been looking, and I say we, it's Martin Dwyer and a number of other people, have been looking at the Ramey Memo, which is this document that Roger Ramey is holding in his hand in a picture taken on July 8th, 1947. And what's really hilarious about that is we talked to the photographer who took the picture. We have a documentation of when the picture was printed in the newspaper, when it was sent over the wires, and we have Roger Ramey holding the document in his hand. So the provenance is perfect. It's just beautiful. You know when it was taken and who's in the picture and what's going on. And the idea is trying to see the document itself and read the document, because you can see there's writing on there. And there's been, I think, 20 years of research in attempting to de-blur it, to understand what's going on. And that's another avenue of research. It hasn't borne fruit yet, and I think our technology just hasn't been capable of resolving the image to the point where we can read it. There are hints. You can see words in the document. I think it says Fort Worth, Texas. It says weather balloon. So it's clearly about the Roswell case, given the timing of this thing and what's going on. So we know it's a document about that. But what we don't know is what else it says. There has been a number of analyses, but they're not universally accepted. And I think that's one of the problems we have with UFO research. We've got to get to the point where the majority of the people, and I don't think we're ever going to get to a point where everybody's going to agree, but where the majority of the people agree with the analysis. And that's where we break down right now. There's a couple of schools of thought of exactly what the Ramey Memo says, but it's an area of research that we can pursue today that isn't going to go away, like the witness testimony and that sort of thing. So we're continuing that research as the technology advances and more people become involved in trying to decipher exactly what the Ramey Memo says. And that was one of the things that we had talked about. But we're going to break here. I'm going to talk about some of the other things that the research has researchers have been doing and that sort of thing about the Roswell case and where we might go in the future. I'll be talking more about this at www.kevinrandle.blogspot.com, and I will be back right after this, so stick around. Gather my thoughts.
It's hard to listen to the news without realizing we're living in volatile, unprecedented times. Yet never has there been such an opportunity to transform the human condition. As old structures fail, where can we find the guidance to co-create a better way? Find Your Path Home is an ever-evolving, leading-edge information, education, and healing resource center designed to support and guide you on your path to unity and enlightenment. Based on sound principles employed by shaman worldwide, we provide techniques that can support you through the current transitions, offering online shamanic classes, international long-distance shamanic healing sessions, complimentary Mission Evolution radio episodes and Stairway to Heaven TV vignettes, seminars, retreats, and much more. All of this can be found on findyourpathhome.com.
So I was watching the X Zone TV channel last night when I was abducted by aliens, and they kept repeating to me over and over again, simultv.com, simultv.com.
What's simultv.com?
That's what I asked them. They had it written on the side of their UFO.
How do you spell that?
UFO.
No, I mean simultv.com.
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 Right. simultv.com.
Interesting that you were abducted by aliens in a simultv.com UFO last night.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. Now that you mention it, I remember now last night I was awakened from a deep sleep. My great-grandmother was standing there. She said she'd come from the hereafter to tell me about simultv.com. She even spelled it out for me. simultv.com, sonny boy.
simultv.com.
simultv.com, sonny boy.
Wow.
Yeah.
Guys, you'll never guess what my psychic guru just told me.
simultv.com.
Exactly. Are you guys psychic too?
Of course.
We all know about simultv.com. simultv.com.
I am reminiscing, I guess, about the festival and some of the activities that took place here in Roswell, New Mexico, and a little bit about the Roswell UFO crash. And there's I guess, great divergence of opinion here. Most of the people who attend the festival, of course, are predisposed to believe that it's alien, and some of them are just rabid about it. And they bring in all the nonsense, MJ-12, for example, and other conspiracy avenues that I just don't really find too interesting. But, you look at everybody's opinion, but there's the hardcore researchers who are trying to determine what exactly happened. And as you know, we mention this every week. I did a book called Roswell in the 21st Century. And the whole point of that is I wanted to look at it, the case as dispassionately as I could, look at it as a cold case, go back through the files, go back through the interviews, go back through the tapes and everything that I had gathered over the years about this, and talk to some of the people that were still involved about this, and see what we could determine about the case. Now, in the early 1990s, I was absolutely convinced that Roswell was extraterrestrial. It was alien, end of discussion. No more needs to be said. It was a very robust case. But as I looked at it more recently, I became a little bit disturbed by some of the things that I had learned. For example, the Glenn Dennis testimony about the nurse and the coffins and all of that sort of thing kind of blew up on us. Glenn Dennis was not as candid with us as he could have been. And when confronted with some of this, he changed the story, which is not a good sign. Glenn Dennis said that he had met with a nurse out at the base. He knew the nurse out at the base. So he hinted at a romantic interlude with her, and he was married at the time, and that she had been involved in a preliminary autopsy at the base, and she told him a little bit about it and drew on a napkin in a bar that he met her, the alien face, what it kind of looked like and that sort of thing, and then shredded it and burned it up in an ashtray. And he said that she was transferred off the base shortly thereafter, and then was killed in a plane accident. We tried to get the name of the nurse from him. He eventually gave it to me quietly. He said, well, her name is Naomi Self, but don't mention this to anybody. And then he proceeded to tell everybody under the sun what the name was. Even Philip Glass ended up with the name, so it wasn't a big secret. We did a lot of research into that, because here's a nurse, an Army nurse. If we could find her to corroborate the story, that would be great. I looked through the unit histories. I looked through the newspapers, because in the newspaper there was always a little blurb, who was new in town, and it was often military people who just arrived in town. Didn't appear there. Didn't appear in the military morning reports. These were issued every morning, literally every morning, by a unit saying who is there for duty and who's on leave, who may be in the hospital, who is AWOL, all that sort of thing appears on that. When they signed into the base, their name would appear. When they signed out, their name would appear. Never found the record of her showing up at the base in any way, shape, or form. A fellow named Vic Golublek did an awful lot of research into this. He came up with, found a database with 124,000 Army nurses' names on it. Her name was never there. Talked to both the base hospital, the people who were assigned there, and the local hospitals looking for it. They couldn't find the name. So Vic confronts Glenn Dennis with this information, and Glenn Dennis says, well, I never told you the right name. So we've spent all this time with him confiding in us that here's the nurse, name of the nurse. Please don't tell anybody, but here's the nurse. And when we actually proved the negative, if you will, that she wasn't here, he changes his story. And for me, that was the end of the Glenn Dennis testimony. And that's what I mean when I say some of the testimonies have blown up on us, that people who we trusted were telling us the truth didn't do so. And it was very worrisome. So as I looked at this information for the book, I was able to eliminate some of the testimony, realized it was not nearly as robust as I had thought. Yes, there were people like Edwin Easley, the provost marshal, who told me basically it was extraterrestrial. And in the conversation with him, I had said to him, are we following the right path? And he said, what do you mean? And I said, well, we think it's extraterrestrial. And he said, well, let me put it this way. It's not the wrong path. I mean, here was a senior officer at the base. He was a member of the primary staff at the base. A very credible gentleman. Never expanded his story, never changed his story, was very credible about it in giving this hint. But there again, it's a hint, and it is testimony. And we have some very interesting testimonies for the case. Jesse Marcel provided some very interesting testimonies, but there are hints that Jesse liked to tell stories as well. There's a book that a woman, Linda Coley wrote called For the Sake of My Country, and it's about an interview she conducted with Jesse Marcel. She spent 4 or 5 hours with him, recording him, telling the stories about all of this sort of thing. And if you go through the book, you find little hints that are very worrisome about what Marcel said. The other thing that Jesse Marcel said was, and I don't know whether this was a confusion on the part of the interviewer, and the interview at this point would have been Bob Pratt, and what Marcel said. But Marcel said that he'd received 5 air medals for shooting down 5 enemy aircraft during World War II. Clearly, he was in the Pacific during World War II. He was an intelligence officer in the Pacific. Clearly, he went on missions because he received air medals, and it mentions that he were on these combat missions. He had like 450 hours of combat flight time, so he got a couple of air medals. We could never verify 5, and we could never verify that he'd shot down enemy aircraft. And if he'd received an air medal for that, it would have said specifically that. The citation would have mentioned, that he had shot down an enemy aircraft, and that was why he was being awarded the air medal. We couldn't verify that, but he did receive air medals. He was in the Pacific, and he did receive air medals. So there were some problematic things with that. But for the most part, every member of Colonel Blanchard's staff that we were able to talk to, the senior staff that we were able to talk to and interview, with one exception, hinted or flat out told us it was extraterrestrial. And so that, kind of opens the door a little bit for that. But there are so many other problems with the case. There's virtually no documentation other than newspaper articles, and we found the single FBI telex that mentions the weather balloon story, but it was not borne out telephonically with Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Wright Field at the time. So there are hints like that, but we don't have anything that tells us specifically what was going on. And that kind of leads us back to the Ramey memo, because if we could read the thing, we might be able to determine exactly what it says, and it might lead us to the extraterrestrial. There's one line, and there's a number of different ways it's interpreted, given the vagueness, the blurriness of the memo itself. And one interpretation by David Rudiak says victims of the wreck. Well, if it's a weather balloon, you're not going to have victims of the wreck. You're going to have a wrecked weather balloon, but not victims of it. So that word becomes key. There's another interpretation that says viewing of the wreck. Well, if you just viewed the wreck, that changes the whole context. J. Bond Johnson, who took the photographs, so he was clearly in Ramey's office, he said at one point that he had handed the document to Ramey so he'd have something in his hand when he posed him for the photographs. The question became, was it a teletype from the newspaper office that Johnson had brought with him and handed to Ramey, or was it a document off Ramey's desk? Well, I have a hard time believing that he would have plucked the document off Ramey's desk to hand to him. So, there's those sorts of problems. And if we could read the memo, it probably would tell us specifically that. I know in the various interpretations, what bothers me about it is that there really is no military jargon. And I'm thinking, I've been in meetings, military meetings, where the jargon was so fast and furious that I got lost in what they were talking about. And it's like a foreign language. And I find it difficult to believe in a teletype message there wouldn't be some kind of jargon. And there are other problems with it like that. But in the end, we really can't read it. And I think some hold up this as the holy grail. If we can read the memo, it's going to prove the case once and for all. I think it's probably not going to lead us much of anywhere. And we're going to be left with the same problems we have. But on the other side of the coin, in talking to the witnesses, there's some interesting civilian witnesses. Bill Brazel, for example, the son of the man that found the debris. Bill took Don Schmidt and me to the debris field where he'd found these scraps of debris himself. So we know exactly where it is. And Bill Brazel told us about how some of the properties, he said that there was one piece that wire like monofilament fishing line, you shine a light in one end and it comes out the other. It was talking about fiber optics, obviously. Talked about a piece of debris which light like bolts of wood, but he couldn't get a scraping of it. He wanted to see if there was any stratification, and he used his pocket knife and he couldn't get a scraping on it, which seemed it was a lot tougher than balsa wood, obviously. And then there was another piece he talked about being like lead foil or tin foil, or you wad it up and it would unfold itself. Unfortunately, of course, he lost the materials. And when I say lost, the Air Force came back and confiscated it from him. But Bill's a very credible man, was a very credible man. And there may be other explanations for the materials that he described. I don't doubt his descriptions were as accurate as he could make them and that sort of thing. So there's another robust witness that hasn't fallen apart. But when we get to the bottom of the whole Roswell case, the problem is we just don't have the evidence to prove it. I can tell you what I know, I can tell you what I think, and I can tell you what I can prove. And what I think and what I know isn't necessarily what I can prove. And that's where we run into the problems with this thing. We have to look at all of that, and we're left basically with testimonies. And you have to determine how credible are the witnesses you're talking to, how accurate are their memories, because we're talking about events that when we started the investigation were 40, 45 years old. And how reliable were those memories, how much contamination there might have been, and so that they were saying things that they learned from other people. We will come back and explore a little bit more about the Roswell case and a little bit more about the festival after we take this break. And take a look at www.kevinrandle.blogspot.com, and I will be back right after this.
How would your life change if you could develop the business and personal skills that you need in order to make more money? Do you want to learn how to achieve your big life goals faster? Then go to findhiddenmoney.com and get the Goal for It online course. The course teaches you how you can set and achieve your biggest goals while completely overcoming the roadblocks to your goals so that you can realize your dreams and imagine more success. Go to findhiddenmoney.com.
Memorable dynamic presentations are a not-so-secret weapon in the business world. Do you have a powerful message that must be shared, but you haven't found a way to deliver that message? Do you want to be known as a top public speaker who gets amazing results? Are you ready to create and deliver your powerful message? Thomas Hides can help you create and deliver your speech to get the results you desire. Visit iconquality.com.
Did you expect your business to flourish, but instead it plateaued or didn't get off the ground yet? Would you like to achieve massive goals and discover new sources of income within your business? When you're ready to experience that type of success with fast results, Cindy Hendricks is the business coach for you. Her work with entrepreneurs and business owners has been life-changing. To get you and your business where you want to be, go to imaginemoresuccess.com.
Has the fear of public speaking stalled your business or personal life? What would you give to develop and maintain supreme confidence? Have an invaluable private program to always perform at your best. Imagine how you would feel. You can have all that and so much more today with Thomas Hyde's life-changing course called Number One Fear Unleashed. Visit numberonefear.com and be liberated from your fear of public speaking.
Well, I'm still seated here in front of the microphone talking about the Roswell Festival and things like that. And I thought, we've kind of explored some of the problems with the testimony, and we're left in the Roswell case with testimony, and you have to decide for yourself whether or not you find the testimony credible and reliable and that sort of thing. And a lot of the testimony has blown up on us in the past, as I mentioned. And that's basically all we have. We have an interesting story, but it's told by many, many people. Many people who are lying about it too, but there are many people who are credible telling us the story. So you have to decide whether or not that testimony is sufficient for you to accept the alien nature of the event. I myself think that as we looked for terrestrial explanations for the craft, and what could it have been if it wasn't an alien spacecraft? What could this thing have been? And we really haven't found a good explanation for it. We know it wasn't some kind of an aircraft accident. It wasn't something from the missile range. It wasn't a Project Mogul, no matter what the skeptics in the Air Force want to claim. That explanation doesn't work either. But we've eliminated everything that we can find, which doesn't eliminate the possibility of some kind of bizarre experiment that the government or the military conducted that they still don't want to talk about, or something terrestrial that we just haven't identified yet. So we're left with that kind of question. And is the testimony sufficient to lead you to the extraterrestrial? You have to kind of decide that for yourself. So anyway, we're trying to get to the bottom of the whole thing, and you have to decide whether the testimony is sufficient for you to make that conclusion, draw that conclusion yourself. I myself have reached the point where I just don't want to make that leap to the extraterrestrial. The testimony isn't sufficient for me to leap to that conclusion. So we'll kind of move on from that now. We'll be looking at the some of the other cases that were talked about during this event. Don Burleson was here, and I'm going to try to get him on the program, and he's done some work on the Levelland case. And that's a sighting that took place in Levelland, Texas in November of 1957. Levelland's about 3 hours from Roswell. And it's kind of interesting. Some of these really good cases are more or less centered around this area, and I think that's coincidence more than anything else. But this was a sighting where people at 13 separate locations reported a craft close to the ground, interfering with their car, interfering with their electric systems of the car, interacting with the environment. The Air Force determined it was ball lightning, which is just an incredibly dumb thing for them to have said in 1957, because in 1957, we weren't even sure that ball lightning existed, let alone alien spacecraft. So we have to take a look at all of that sort of thing when we look at it. But Don had gone into the area, again, many, many years after the fact, and he talked to the daughter and the widow of the sheriff. And the sheriff's story is much more robust than had been reported by everybody else when they reported on the case. But it's a very interesting case because we have the witness testimony from a number of sources who were independent of one another when they came forward to talk to their story. They called the sheriff's department or the police department, were interviewed at that time and had not interacted and hadn't heard anything. So it's very interesting that way. There is a report, and when we bring Dawn on the program, we will get more into that. The reason the sheriff had gone out was one of the ranchers had called to complain about a burned area on his property, a landing trace like that. That would be a second chain of evidence, physical evidence on the ground. So we have the interaction with the environment, stalling the car engines. We have the burned area on the ground, which would be physical evidence to be seen, and we have the witness testimony. 3 different chains of evidence, which makes it a very robust case in that respect. Unfortunately, at the time, the Air Force was busy arguing with Don Kehoe at NICAP about how many witnesses there were. We're not arguing about the evidence. We're not arguing about the testimonies. We're arguing about how many witnesses there were. Kehoe said there were 9. The Air Force said there were 3. I was able to identify people at 13 separate locations. So there are clearly a lot of witnesses out there. But that was, is one of the things that was discussed here at the festival. And not all the programming dealt specifically with the Roswell case or Roswell investigations, but looked at other aspects of the UFO phenomenon. And that's also important as well. There was a variety of people. Travis Walton was here talking about his abduction experiences. Kathleen Marden was here, as you know, who was talking about her abduction research. Alejandro Rojas was talking about what he had learned in his conversations with various governmental officials and the research and the reporting that he has done. So we looked at all of those sorts of things. So people come to the festival, obviously, so that they can, I think some of them to reinforce their own belief structures. They want to talk about what they've seen or what they believe or what they think they've seen, that sort of thing. I've had people come up to me to talk to me about their UFO sightings, and one of them kind of disturbed me, not so much the sighting, but his reaction to it. Very frightened by the whole phenomenon, thought something was horrible going on and was very scared about it. And it wasn't all that spectacular of a sighting. It was just sort of a close approach of a craft and had no other really attributes of it, but it was something that frightened him immensely. And as we sat and chatted about that, and I was able to mention, well, there's been lots of UFO sightings over the years, and lots of people have reported them, and there's really been no one killed or injured by UFOs directly. There have been cases where people have been injured by their approaching close to a UFO, and it may be a manifestation of the heat radiated by the craft or some kind of other radiation from the craft and that sort of thing. And there's some interesting documentation for some of those. Oftentimes it's a sunburn, like you've been out in the sun way too long as opposed to anything else. But I mean, there's a physical evidence. I was close to this UFO and now I have this reddish glow on my skin because of the close approach to the UFO. And there's been a couple of pilots killed in chasing UFOs, but I think for the most part, it's not a direct reaction of the UFO, but it's mistakes made by the pilots. I think specifically of Thomas Mantell, who was killed in January of 1948, but I think it was a direct result of him violating regulations. Military regulations say you can't fly above 14,000 feet without oxygen. And in my research, I learned that hypoxia, which is a lack of oxygen in the bloodstream, so you have a lack of oxygen in the brain, can onset itself very, very quickly. At 20,000 feet, they estimate without supplemental oxygen, the average person will remain conscious 10 minutes. At 25,000 feet, it's like 6 minutes. Mantell and his wingmen had been climbing to 20,000 feet for period of time. And he said, well, I'm going to go to 25,000 feet and circle for 10 minutes. And if I don't see anything or I can't get any closer, then I'll descend. He didn't have 10 minutes. He obviously passed out during the climb to 25,000 feet from hypoxia. The plane was trimmed to climb. It continued to climb until the torque of the engine pulled it over, went into a power dive and disintegrated. So he was killed not by the UFO, but by chasing a UFO. I think the UFO is probably a skyhook balloon, but the real point is he wasn't killed by the UFO. So we look at all of those sorts of things, but there's some interesting cases like that where you have that sort of physical evidence. And we have to be aware of that. But we look at the festival, as I said, they explore all avenues of the phenomenon, and they do get people talking about ancient aliens and that sort of thing. This is an area for which I do not subscribe. I don't believe in the ancient aliens. I don't think that our great civilization leaped forward were inspired by aliens coming down. I've often said that the aliens were helping the Egyptians, for example. I'm thinking they've come from outer space, they've landed on Earth, and the only building material they can find is stone. Why didn't they bring some of the metallurgy with them that would be able to create really great structures and suggest that kind of thing rather than these stone structures they have built? So, you've got to look at all of that sort of thing. But at the festival, they I don't want to say they embrace all of this sort of thing, but they give some of the people an opportunity to talk about their experiences and what they believe. There are people who want to hear that sort of thing. It's kind of like who wants to see one movie and who wants to see another movie. They make movies for a variety of people over the times, and I think that programming in a venue like this, where it's a festival, and they call it a festival as opposed to a symposium or a research conference or anything like that. It's a festival that they look at all of those sorts of things, which explains why they have a parade at night. And they used to have an alien judging contest. You dressed up in your best alien costume, and it was a judging contest and things like that. And for a festival, I don't have a problem with that. I think it's a good idea, and it helps Roswell, the Roswell city, bring in tourist dollars, and you can see the result of that as well. So I can't really complain about that sort of thing. But I do I am kind of worried, I suppose, about the way that some of the programming and some of the theories that are expounded around here, and the level of belief in those things. It's not like it's a question anymore. It's not like we don't have solid evidence. It's like, this is the fact, period, end of discussion. And that worries me about the closed-mindedness of some of the people. And I stress that some of the people, not all of them. And most of the researchers are looking at different things as well. They're not that closed-minded or that closed off. I'm going to have to take a quick break here. I will explore some of this more on my blog at www.kevinrandle.blogspot.com. And if you're really interested in the Roswell case, I think you should take a look at the book Roswell in the 21st Century, which outlines I guess some of the information that I've seen and things like that. So I will be back right after this, so stick around.
I am Dr. Carl O'Helvey, founder, president of a new cancer foundation focusing on evidence-based physical, mental, and spiritual interventions, including natural cancer cures, prayer, meditation, affirmations, nutrition, and other related holistic cancer prevention and cure modalities. These are used in cancer education, research, and financing care. I ask for your help to continue this important work by donating at www.holisticcancerfoundation.com.
They are here, and they've been here for thousands of years, making their presence known in the shadows. They might be seen by a lonely motorist on a deserted road late at night, or by a frightened and confused husband in the bedroom he is sharing with his wife. But who are they? What do they want? Why are they here? Perhaps most concerning, has the government been aware of their presence all along? The new book by Ellie Marzulli, UFO Disclosure, the 70-year cover-up exposed, delves into the world of UFOs. Can full disclosure be soon? Order now and receive a free hour and 37-minute DVD on the UFO phenomenon. UFOs are real. Get both the book and the DVD, a $40 value, for only $19.99. To order your book and DVD today, go to lamarzulli.net. That's LAMARZULLI.net.
Christopher Fulton is a survivor of the national security state. All he wanted to do was preserve history when he acquired a Cartier watch from the estate of President Kennedy's personal secretary. But that simple act set off a terrible chain reaction. He was pursued by the U.S. Justice Department and the FBI, thrust into the middle of the U.S. government's Assassination Records Review Board, even monitored and pursued by the Russian government. All because that Cartier watch was the missing link of evidence, a timepiece worn by JFK that fateful day in Dallas, a link resulting in Christopher being incarcerated and attacked for 9 years because he opened a hidden chapter in history. The intriguing journey outlined fully in Christopher Fulton's memoir, The Inheritance, is available now through TrineDay.com or Amazon.com. The Inheritance, Poisoned Fruit of JFK's Assassination by Christopher and Michelle Fulton is a must-read, an incredible tale of how easily our own government can overrule justice. The Inheritance, Poisoned Fruit of JFK's Assassination.
I am wrapping up my stay here in Roswell, New Mexico. I'm reflecting on the festival. I'm reflecting on the Roswell case and ufology in general, I guess. And I think that when we look at the whole of ufology, and the festival and the museum, highlight ufology that way, that there's some very interesting stuff going on. There's stuff that suggests the extraterrestrial, but there's stuff that is very problematic. I am very skeptical of the abduction phenomenon, and as you know, we've talked to Kathleen Martin about this. I'll be talking to Travis Walton about this, and I'm just very skeptical about it. I have said in the past that if there was legitimate abduction, people being taken to the spacecraft for examination, that I would expect it to be more like what Barney and Betty Hill reported, more like what Travis Walton reported, a single event, sort of a target of opportunity. Gather the information like we would tag a beast in the ocean or whatever and send them back on their merry way after gathering the data that we wanted. When we get into these cases where people talk about multiple abductions, they began when they were children, that becomes problematic for me. I just can't see that happening. And I worry about the logistics of it, and something that nobody really addresses. If you're traveling interstellar distances, and the distances are massive, and there is no way that we know that it's possible to do it other than long term, where the craft would be traveling literally for years to get from there to here, or for us to get from here to there, it makes it very problematic. And then you talk about the numbers of people who believe they've been abducted, and you've got dozens and dozens of ships orbiting the Earth, and the logistics just boggle the mind. And why don't we have much better evidence gathered about this sort of thing? I've also suggested that the abduction research strikes me as more like case studies, which you would do in psychology, a case study where you're talking to people and you're doing analysis of that. And we really haven't advanced far beyond that. Kathleen Martin suggested some things that they're doing that I find interesting, but I just don't think it's going to take us to the extraterrestrial. And that's that's a difference of opinion. But I think when you're talking to someone like Kathleen Martin, she's very enthusiastic about her work, and she seems to understand some of the problems you have with that sort of work. But when you get to the bottom line, we really still don't have the physical evidence to make the case. And that's kind of the way we are with the entire UFO phenomenon. We don't really have the evidence to make the case, prove it beyond a shadow of a doubt, so that we can all say, yes, there's alien visitation, let's go on to the next question. Festivals like this kind of, I guess, bring to lots of people some of the theories of ufology, some of the information from ufology, some of the testimonies and the evidence that we do have from ufology. And that can't necessarily be a bad thing. But I wonder if, in the future, they won't be looking back at us and kind of laughing at us for our belief structures and some of this sort of thing. And I try to approach the research, try to approach the investigations from a semi-skeptical point of view. And yes, I understand that my bias tends to get in the way, but everybody has a bias and it tends to get in the way. But I try to be as dispassionate as I can to learn what's going on. And a festival like this sometimes can help us gain insight into ufology, even if it takes us in the wrong direction, meaning that the insight we gain suggests that a specific case probably has a terrestrial explanation or a mundane explanation as opposed to something alien. But it brings together people who are interested in UFOs and a lot of researchers who have done a lot of work in UFOs, and we discuss those ideas. And we don't necessarily discuss them in the panels or in the presentations or in the areas where the books and all of that stuff are available, but we do it with one another in private conversations. And we learn a little bit about, well, somebody has this idea that needs to be looked at, or somebody else has this idea that needs to be looked at. And so we take a look at all of that sort of thing and talk about it with the various researchers about that. Although it's not necessarily, as I said, open to the public discussion. But I know in discussing some of this with Don Schmidt and Tom Carey, for example, looking at the different avenues that the Roswell research could go, and they're going in a little bit different direction than I would go, and that would be they're looking at talking to the children and the grandchildren of the people who were in Roswell in 1947, and I'm not sure that's a lucrative venue. And we've kind of talked about how do you separate the truth of those second-hand, third-hand testimonies from the primary data. And I am not convinced that that's a lucrative way to follow, but they're doing the research, and they're enjoying what they're doing, and they're trying to do it as the best they can. I just avoid the secondhand testimonies, and that's my own personal, I guess, bias against that. I look at the different things. I hold out some hope for the Ramey memo, for example, that we will be able to read it and it'll give us a real clue, as opposed to kind of dashing our hopes. I still look for people that have letters or journals or diaries from 1947, people who were here, where they might have mentioned the alien craft. They might have mentioned something strange going on in the base, and we just haven't found anything like that. I find it incredible that the number of people involved, we have not found anything like that. And I can kind of understand it from the military point of view, where they were told not to talk about it, and it was classified, and if you do, you're going to get in a lot of trouble. But there's a lot of civilians involved in it as well. We talk about the ranchers out near Corona, New Mexico. We talked about the Proctors. We talk about the Sutherlands. We talk about all these people who were sort of involved in it, and we just don't find anything. And it may be that the ranchers out there didn't keep journals or didn't keep diaries and didn't write letters, but the military people would. And you would just think that somebody would have written something dated July of 1947 and said, boy, this strange thing happened, and we just haven't found anything like that. And I find that very worrisome. And I find it worrisome that we find so many witnesses that aren't telling the truth, that are confabulating their experiences to put themselves in the center of the story. One fellow came to us and he said that his dad was a colonel who had flown in from Wright Field. And he was with his dad, and his dad took him out to the crash site. I just could not envision any military officer taking his son out to the crash site that's now heavily guarded and probably under heavy classification as well, violate the classification to take his son out there. So, we reject that story sort of out of hand. And I know there's stories like that we've all rejected. But we've also been fooled by some people. Frank Kaufman comes to mind immediately, and he seemed very credible. He seemed like he was telling the truth, and he seemed that things were going this way. When we looked at the yearbook to see if Frank Kaufman was in there, we find a picture of him receiving a medal from one of the base officers. I think it's a World War II victory medal, which astonishes me they would have some kind of ceremony presenting that, because everybody who was involved in the military got the World War II victory medal. But he's in the yearbook 1947, puts him at the base, puts him operating with these people out there. So that was sort of corroboration for him. We later learned from the documentation he presented us, he gave us a copy of his separation papers, and it showed him to be a master sergeant with training and intelligence. But when we checked with St. Louis, where all the military records are held for people who've served in the military and who are not on active duty, we learned that he had been a staff sergeant and his training had been in administration, and we found other evidence that he wasn't telling the truth. Initially, we believed the story. We now know it's not to be true. It's not true. And we rejected. He should be reduced to a footnote in a book, but we have to mention it because he had been part of the story originally, and that complicates the whole thing. But as I say, when we're talking with the various researchers here, you might have a piece of information that's critical to me, or I might have one that's critical to you, and we kind of share that information. The festival brings us together and allows us to make that, to share that information that way. And I think that's one of the good things of it. That when talking to these other people, I can say, "Oh yeah, that's a very good point," or "No, you missed the boat on this one. Here's what we need to do, or here's why this witness is not really credible anymore." And I noticed in my lectures here, I mentioned some of this stuff as well. Here are witnesses that have been touted as being authentic and were not. And I know that Tom and Don did the same thing, talked about some of the evidence that has blown up in our faces. So that's kind of an overview of the festival here in Roswell, New Mexico. As I say, some of it's a party, some of it encourages research. There's an opportunity to look at the material that they have gathered here, and is open for the researchers to take a look at. And there's an awful lot of material that's helpful for that sort of research. And the festival brings all of that into the forefront. I think that's a good thing. I do wish, personal opinion, that some of the people and some of the exhibits would be labeled a little bit differently. I would do it a little bit differently, but that's just me, and I could be wrong on those points. So if you have questions, you have comments, take a look at my blog, www.kevinrandle.blogspot.com. If it's a personal note addressed to me, I monitor the content of the blog postings so that it doesn't appear automatically, and I can respond to you personally if you've given me an email address or you have a question like that. And I try to do that, and sometimes I put the questions up on the blog to be answered as well. But that's, as I say, at www.kevinrandle.blogspot.com. If you're interested in the Roswell case, I think that you need to take a look at Roswell in the 21st century. One fellow who came up to me was talking about the book. He said, it really isn't for the novice, though. You've got to have a kind of an understanding of the whole case to really understand what I'm talking about there. I wasn't sure that was exactly right, but that's one man's opinion. I will be returning to the microphone here in 167 hours with another episode of A Different Perspective. So think about us in the future and tune in for another episode. Thank you for listening.
If you are looking for a safe, zero-calorie, natural option to the harmful artificial sweeteners on the market today, Just Like Sugar is what you're looking for. Just Like Sugar is a wonderful natural alternative for those health-conscious people who choose a calorie-restricted diet with a great, pure, sweet flavor that tastes just like sugar. Just Like Sugar is a great natural option for people suffering from diabetes and may be useful in restricted diet programs where standard sugars are not allowed and does not cause a laxative effect of some other sweeteners. Just Like Sugar comprises a perfect blend of chicory root fiber, natural calcium, natural vitamin C, and Just Like Sugar's sweetness comes from the natural flavors from the peel of the orange. Just Like Sugar is a natural alternative to harmful artificial sweeteners and will change the way that you believe all natural sweetener products taste. Just Like Sugar is available at your local Whole Foods markets, Wild Oats markets, Henry's, Sun Harvest, and many other fine natural food stores in the U.S., Canada, and worldwide. They are here, and they've been here for thousands of years, making their presence known in the shadows. They might be seen by a lonely motorist on a deserted road late at night, or by a frightened and confused husband in the bedroom he is sharing with his wife. But who are they? What do they want? Why are they here? Perhaps most concerning, has the government been aware of their presence all along? The new book by Ellie Marzulli, UFO Disclosure, the 70-year cover-up exposed, delves into the world of UFOs. Can full disclosure be soon? Order now and receive a free hour and 37-minute DVD on the UFO phenomenon. UFOs are real. Get both the book and the DVD, a $40 value, for only $19.99. To order your book and DVD today, go to lamarzulli.net. That's LAMARZULLI.net.
You have heard of the X Zone? Now watch it on Simul TV, plus 500 video games, live TV channels, free video on demand, worldwide, and more. Does this sound like tomorrow's television? Well, it is, but you can have it today, right now. It is Simul TV. Simul TV offers what the others only wish they could provide. 15 exclusive channels like X-Zone, Sci-Fi, and Horror. We are worldwide. No other provider offers that. 500 built-in video games. No need to have an extra expensive system. We have them included. Free video on demand. Live streaming events from around the world. Interactive online network, and much more. Tomorrow's TV today. Simul TV. Sound too good to be true? Well, it's not. You can have Simul TV today. Sign up at simultv.com. Do it today.